Watch right now on the Front News Project. A nuclear Sarmat exploded over Russia itself. We will show footage of Putin's public humiliation. Hell in Dnipro, enemy ballistic missiles continue to kill Ukrainians. And the battle for Pokrovsk continues. The enemy is launching local assaults. Fiery, hot, and blazing. Watch footage from the front lines right now. Greetings, I'm here with you, Vladimir Timoshenko, and let's get straight to the main point. Nuclear, of course, with no analogs. A Russian Sarmat missile exploded on the territory of the Russian Federation itself. Are you surprised by this fact? Write in the comments. Russian propaganda is keeping quiet about the failure of yet another one of Putin's so-called wonder weapons. It would be one thing, but the missile exploded in front of hundreds of onlookers who were watching its launch and its almost immediate self-destruction. What else are the Kremlin's mouthpieces keeping silent about? We'll tell you more next.
A unique missile system with no analogs in the world is already practically in service with the Russian army. Back in June 2023, Putin was making such statements.
Very soon, the very first launches of the Sarmat complex with the powerful new, formidable heavy missile will officially go on combat duty.
It's already December 2025 outside, and yet another so-called unparalleled weapon still isn't on combat duty.
There's nothing like the Sarmat in the world.
And it's still not on duty with us yet. It will be on duty soon.
And judging by the latest failed test at the Yasny Cosmodrome in the Orenburg region, the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile is still a long way from being put on combat duty.
Please hold me tightly. I am currently filming something important right now.
This is already the second failed attempt to test the Sarmat missile. The first one happened in 2024. The missile exploded in the silo during a failed launch at the Plesets Cosmodrome in the Arkhangelsk region. This time, the failed launch took place in Kazakhstan. Locals recorded it on video during the last weekend of November. After the explosion, a huge cloud of poisonous orange and purple color rose into the air. Russian authorities did not provide an official comment, while local media reported that there would be no evacuation from Yasny, claiming that the smoke cloud poses no threat to people and that everything is fine. The color of the cloud after the explosion is characteristic of something highly toxic.
Such a color is characteristic only of rockets that use rather toxic fuel, the so-called pair of nitrogen tetroxide and unsymmetrical dimethyl hydrazine, which are better known as amyl and heptyl. It is precisely amyl and heptyl that are used as fuel in a whole range of Soviet and now Russian rockets.
Yasny Cosmodrome. First and foremost, it is a missile launch base, one of 11 sites in Russia from which rockets with nuclear warheads can be launched. And with high probability, these were yet another series of unsuccessful tests of the Sarmat intercontinental ballistic missile.
The missile is supposedly in serial production, supposedly even adopted into service, all this since 1922, but with so many launch failures, it's very hard to talk about its actual deployment and real combat readiness, at least by even the most basic high standards. Both the shape of the missile and, most importantly, the location where this happened point to the Sarmat. Sarmat, the location, that's the very same Yasny where...
If the information about the launch is confirmed 100%, then this was the third or fourth launch of the Sarmat, of which only one was successful, at least partially. Most likely, the launches were carried out at the end of the year so that Putin could threaten with another wonder weapon during his annual address to the Federal Assembly. But as we can see, things didn't go according to plan.
It was just another childish morning performance, like in kindergarten. Everything was scripted, who says what, but there was no reason for it because the missile exploded. Andriy Ryzhenko, Deputy Chief of Staff of the Ukrainian Navy from 2004 to 2020.
80% of the tests. Moreover, it was the initial ones that were successful, while the subsequent ones were not. No one can seriously consider this missile as a finished product yet. However, there is no doubt that work on it is ongoing.
Along with the failed launch of the Sarmat nuclear missile, another incident occurred over the weekend at the Baikonur Cosmodrome during the launch of Soyuz MS-28. In
the aftermath, after a post-flight inspection, it was determined that the rocket engine's exhaust plume from the first stage tore off part of Launch Complex number 6 of Space Rocket Complex number 31. The cosmonauts were unharmed, but the launch complex will require repairs. After the transfer of Gagarin's launch pad number 1 to the Kazakh Museum of Cosmonautics, pad number 31 remains the only one from which manned launches can be carried out. There is no longer a backup or alternative site for Soyuz manned flights. Only cargo launch pads remain.
Now, the only Roscosmos site from which manned launches could be carried out has been left without a functioning service cabin. Rocket and space programs in Russia, both military and research, are failing one after another. And such failures cast serious doubt on Russia's status as both a nuclear and space power.
And now about something truly terrifying. Russian ballistic missiles continued to kill peaceful Ukrainians. On the morning of December 1st, the enemy launched a missile attack on the city of Dnipro. 4 people were killed, dozens injured. At the same time, the armed forces of Ukraine are striking hard at enemy military targets. This time, Dagestan was under attack. Our journalists know all the details.
Drones in Kaspiysk, Dagestan.
Strikes on the Caspian, it's a distance of over 1,000 kilometers. For Kaspiysk, these are routine actions by the Ukrainian defense forces and accordingly the Ukrainian intelligence community.
There are a number of military facilities of the occupying country in Kaspiysk, as well as enterprises of the oil refining complex. Accordingly, they could have become the target of the strike. In these shots, Ukrainian drone operators on the border are eliminating legitimate targets. As a result, in the southern Slobozansky direction, 2 enemy vehicles, communication systems, and 5 occupiers were destroyed. And here, the soldiers of the 57th Brigade are destroying waiting drones whose plan was to disrupt Ukrainian logistics. Another small victory for the armed forces of Ukraine, the clearing of the village of Ivanivka from occupiers in the Dnipropetrovsk region. On the deep state map, you can see that on November 28th, Ivanivka was marked as a gray zone. And on the 29th, it was already marked as liberated territory. The situation remains more complicated in the Pokrovsk direction. In Mirnohrad, the Russian army does not stop trying to encircle the Ukrainians.
Regarding Mirnohrad, the situation is difficult. Fighting is taking place directly in Mirnohrad itself, on the outskirts. The occupiers are trying to act with small assault groups, to slip through to infiltrate directly into the city, to take over the buildings and create conditions for securing positions and accumulating both manpower and accordingly means of destruction. Ukraine's defense forces are successfully conducting strike and search operations aimed at destroying the enemy's small assault groups.
The US is demanding a complete withdrawal of the Ukrainian armed forces from Donbas, journalists report. The Ukrainian side is opposed and is demanding a meeting between Zelensky and Trump.
At the moment, the negotiation process has not yet reached a conclusion. On the other hand, it should also be emphasized that Bitkov has already flown to Moscow for talks with the Russian dictator.
Meanwhile, Bloomberg reports that NATO is preparing for a potential conflict with Russia with minimal support from the US.
At the moment, it is precisely under pressure from the United States that the process of actual modernization of the military-industrial complex of European NATO countries is taking place. Accordingly, these processes are related to re-equipping European partners with the latest strike systems and, consequently, with active defense measures.
Ukrainians can also boast about the modernization of their weaponry. Our country is developing weapons against Russian glide bombs and can already report some successes. The use and destruction of the first 100 Prague aerial bombs,
the strategic deployment, subsequent impact, and complete destruction of the initial 100 enemy aerial bombs, meticulously documented and analyzed of the enemy. They strike the positions of the Ukrainian defense forces using up to 300 glide bombs per day. In response to these challenges, the Ukrainian side has developed a system to counter glide bombs. We are talking about a joint development with NATO countries, which will include several components: ground-based, airborne, and accordingly, electronic warfare systems.
The development of new defense systems is vital for Ukrainians under constant shelling from Russia. At this point, every resident of Ukraine is under threat, even the weapons developers themselves. During the strike on Vyshhorod in the Kiev region, an employee of the defense company Firepoint, who was working on the Flamingo missile, was killed in his own home. With an Iskander-M ballistic missile strike, Russia took the lives and health of peaceful residents of Dnipro, who will no longer go to work, return home, or visit friends. because the Kremlin has taken that possibility away from them. And
Now, an analysis of the operational situation on the Kostiantynivka front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. On the Kostiantynivka front, the enemy attacked our troops' positions near Oleksandr Shultino, Prishchevka, Rusinoyar, Sofiyivka, Shcherbinivka, Ivanivka, and in the direction of the settlements of Mykolaiivka, Kostiantynivka, and Bereztok. The defense forces have already repelled 15 enemy attacks. 3 more attacks are still ongoing. And here's an important point. The war crimes committed by the Russians will definitely not go unpunished. Muscovites and other Russians should get ready. A new year without electricity. The Ukrainian armed forces are disabling Russia's energy infrastructure in response to the barbaric attacks by the occupying army. The likelihood of prolonged blackouts in Russia is growing every day at a geometric rate. Here are the details.
The Ukrainian armed forces are significantly increasing both the number and effectiveness of strikes on Russian heating and power generation facilities. The actions of Ukraine's defense forces are a response to the ongoing strikes on Ukraine's civilian and critical infrastructure.
In order to somehow bring this war to a stalemate, to shift it, we need to learn not only to repel enemy attacks on the front line, but also to suppress their logistics and their aviation. That's why these measures became necessary, and I'm not even mentioning the need to strike at enterprises of Russia's military-industrial complex and its energy system.
By trying to leave Ukrainians without electricity, the Russian dictator is dooming millions of Russians to a dark and cold winter.
If they threaten a blackout, for example, in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin must realize that a blackout will also come to the Russian capital.
This is Belgorod. Basically, there's no electricity anywhere in Belgorod at all.
Since the beginning of November, Ukraine has carried out dozens of strikes on Russian electrical substations. Long-range drones are cutting off power in occupied Donetsk and Crimea.
Basically, charge your phones, looks like.
They decided to cut off our electricity everywhere.
I've already counted more than 36.
Huh? Kaluzhskaya 32 darkness, and then it goes on. Darkness, darkness, darkness.
And cruise missiles and jet drones are introducing millions to the delights of blackouts. Millions of residents in the European part of Russia, including Moscow and the Moscow region. In addition to Ukrainian weapons, we must not forget about the supply of Western arms, which Ukraine has also recently begun using to strike Russian territory.
The corresponding approval has been received. Therefore, we can say that the territories of the Rostov, Kursk, Belgorod, and Bryansk regions are within the strike zone. Of Western strike systems, I want to emphasize again, ATACMS, Scalp, Storm Shadow, as well as accordingly the modernized version of the S-200 surface-to-air missile system.
Before the onset of winter, Ukraine possesses a wide range of powerful long-range weaponry. Bark, Piklo, Polyanitsia, and FP-1 rocket drones, as well as Flamingo and Long Neptune cruise missiles, can reach the largest Russian cities, including heating and power supply facilities in Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Given the climatic conditions of the Russian Federation and the tactical and technical characteristics of Ukraine's strike capabilities, the Russian Federation is facing a harsh winter, both literally and figuratively. Literally. First and foremost, this concerns thermal power plants and other industrial facilities that sustain the life of major Russian cities.
And now let's move to the blazing Pokrovsk sector of the front. The enemy army's bloody rampage continues. And here as well. Today in the Pokrovsk direction, the enemy attacked our defenders' positions 43 times in the areas of populated settlements. Novaya Shakova, Dorozhnaya, Nikonorovka, Beletskaya, Shakova, Rodinskaya, Mirnograd, Novoekonomicheskaya, Rovno, Pokrovsk, Zverevo, Kotlina, Udakhnaya, Molodetskaya, Novopodgornaya, Filia, and in the direction of the settlement of Grishina. Fighting is still ongoing in 10 locations. Yes, the enemy continues to attack the logistical routes in the Pokrovsk area. But Ukrainian soldiers do not consider this a sign of encirclement. This is stated in the report. Of the 7th Air Assault Corps of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, we will tell and show you what is happening in the Pokrovsk area and at other hotspots on the front in our military review.
Greed that doomed the Russian occupiers. Near Berdyansk, during a special operation, Chechen Kadyrovites were sent to the afterlife, reports the main intelligence directorate. Thus, Ukrainian partisans discovered that the valiant marauders of Don Don had set up a scheme to sell stolen fuel they themselves had stolen. The bearded men were selling diesel at the same spot on the highway near Berdyansk. That very spot ultimately became their mass grave. As a result of targeted strikes by the main intelligence directorate, 2 vehicles used by the Akhmat fighters were successfully destroyed. And that's not all. This weekend, Putin also lost 2 tankers from his shadow fleet. These tankers, which are under sanctions due to their involvement in transporting Russian oil, were attacked in the Black Sea by Ukrainian drones. Sibabi.
The Kairos tankers encountered Ukrainian drones. And Avarat, I think that's right. The incident occurred near the coast of Turkey, but in neutral waters, so there can be no claims against us. So how did it happen? It is reported that these were SBU drones. Sources are saying this, and apparently these sources are not ordinary, but rather very special, because they also leaked the video. And this is an attack on Russian, well, de facto. Not de jure, but de facto, Russian tankers will face simply some incredible consequences. We have finally decided to implement our sanctions on this issue. So we are attacking not only Novorossiysk, not only Tuapse, but also accordingly these tankers that are transporting oil. Well, or these in particular are not transporting now, but used to transport.
Russians will find no peace, neither at sea nor on land. In fact, the armed forces of Ukraine are giving the occupiers no respite on any section of the front without exception. Ukrainian border guards have shared a video report of the work they've done. Their drone operators destroyed enemy shelters, communication equipment, and UAV control antennas in the northern Slobozhanskaya direction. As a result, the enemy in this area has effectively lost its eyes and ears and is temporarily unable to conduct full-scale combat operations. The situation for the enemy is not much better in their own rear either. There, in the vicinity of the village of Mokra Orlovka in the Belgorod region, our MiG-29 fighter from the Ghost of Kiev unit carried out precision strikes on the occupiers' command post. The Kremlin does not admit which of the Russian generals was hit by the Ukrainian fighters' strike. However, Ukrainian intelligence hints that as a result of the raid, the Russian army may have lost several high-ranking military officials at once. Nevertheless, the Russian army continues to put on a brave face in a bad situation and is desperately trying to prove to the whole world, and apparently to Putin first and foremost, that the so-called special military operation announced by Moscow is going according to plan. So, following the old tradition, Russian flag bearers tried to raise their tricolor over the building in Vovchansk, claiming that the settlement was already under the control of the occupiers. But there was a hitch. A Ukrainian drone disagreed with them.
We are sending a message to Vladimir Putin, and not just to Vladimir Putin, that all his stories about everything going according to plan and that he is in a state of permanent composure and that none of this affects him at all. Well, in short, his assessment of the situation is wrong.
And
here are unique shots from a Ukrainian unmanned ground vehicle equipped with an M2 Browning machine gun in the middle of the night. It encountered Russian armored vehicles on the road. For the occupiers, the encounter was a complete surprise, and for the crew of the MTLB and the armored vehicle itself, it was their last combat mission. They were left not only without equipment, but also without the means to deliver it. Even in the rear, Russian occupiers can only dream of peace. And it's all thanks to concerned partisans. Recently, they carried out a successful sabotage operation in Bryansk, delivering a precise strike against enemy railway logistics. As a result, the electric locomotive used by the Russian army to transport military cargo was turned into a pile of scrap metal. This created significant problems in supplying the occupying front and disrupted the schedules of trains carrying ammunition, equipment and fuel that were being prepared for dispatch to the front line in the Sumy direction. Overall, in the past 24 hours, the Russians have lost at least 5 tanks, 7 artillery systems, 2 multiple rocket launchers, as well as another 1,000 soldiers.
Russians, warm greetings to all of you.
And now let's move to the Huliaipol sector of the front. The enemy army is acting true to form here as well. In the Huliaipol direction, 9 combat engagements have been recorded in the areas of the settlements of Zatishia, Novoye Zaporizhzhia, Varvarivka, Privolne and Huliaipol. One of the combat engagements is still ongoing. Meanwhile, the aggressor state Russia is stepping up its actions as part of a hybrid war against NATO countries. That's why Europe has now decided on something that just a few years ago might have seemed impossible. They are planning how to strike back. And in Germany, they have even developed a secret 1,200-page plan to prepare for a possible war with Russia. This was reported by the Wall Street Journal, citing its sources. Here are the details.
Europe is preparing to respond to Russia's attacks. Members of the European Parliament proposed defending together, learning from Ukraine, and tightening sanctions against Russia and Belarus, according to Deutsche Welle.
You have to speak to Russia in its own language. Russia only understands the language of force. That's why Russia has excellent relations with Turkey, even though Turkey shot down its plane and moreover didn't say it was a mistake. Although they apologized for doing it, but at the same time made it clear, we warned you.
A day later, Politico also reported that Europe is considering retaliatory measures against Russia.
As of now, I think it's still, unfortunately, too early to talk about any more serious response from Europe. Even though it's obvious that aggression against Europe from the Russian Federation has been going on for a long time, and Russian drones, or drones that take off in Europe, most likely launched by people connected to the Russian Federation, are flying in. Europe is still not psychologically prepared or truly ready to resort to, let's say, the direct and overt use of military pressure mechanisms or coercive measures.
According to journalist sources, the Kremlin's ideas of retaliation range from joint offensive cyber operations and faster, more coordinated identification of the sources of hybrid attacks, to unexpected military exercises led by NATO. According to the Wall Street Journal's description, Germany's plan appears to be more concrete. The country has developed a secret plan to prepare for a possible war with Russia.
In Germany, they also considered, well, maybe sacrificing Ukraine and that's it. But in 2023, sometime closer to by the end of 2023, the German Council on Foreign Relations prepared a report that included the phrase that, in the event of Ukraine's defeat, a war between Germany and Russia is a prospect within 6 to 10 years. In other words, it's not that this particular war is entirely cancelled. It may indeed be temporarily postponed, but over a significantly longer period of time, it will most certainly still happen. Later on, people in Germany said that no, it won't be 6 to 10 years. The war could start in as little as a year.
In just over 2 years, the Germans created a document that provides for sending up to 800,000 NATO troops, including German and US units, to the east to a hypothetical front line. Sources from the Wall Street Journal claim that the plan details the logistical routes along which the troops are to be deployed.
Naturally, it is more acceptable for them to do this on Ukrainian territory than to allow it on their own soil. But what does it mean to do this on Ukrainian territory? It means that Germany will not send its troops to Ukrainian territory to fight against Russia. And so far, we are not seeing any serious signals from our European partners indicating a readiness to send their troops to Ukraine. But there is talk about it. Emmanuel Macron sometimes talks about this, but somehow this idea doesn't really find support among his partners in the European Union.
By continuing its aggression, Russia must understand that in Ukraine it may face not only the armed forces of Ukraine, but also other military forces defending the sovereignty of their own countries.
And now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Lyman front. Fierce fighting continues here as well. On the Lyman front today, the aggressor launched 16 attacks in the areas of the settlements of Druzhulubivka, Tverdokhlebovo, Karpovka, Sredny, Shandrigolovo, Novosilovka, Drobyshevo, Stavki, and Zarechnoe. Currently, 3 more combat clashes are ongoing. If you want peace, prepare for war. And Ukraine is preparing to repel enemy attacks even in 2026, as well as to strike deep into Russia, of course, targeting military and strategic sites. In particular, Ukraine and Norway will open a joint drone production line next year. But that's far from all the bad news for the enemy. My colleagues know more about this. Let's watch the report and draw the appropriate conclusions.
A new level and scale. Ukraine and Norway have reached an agreement to collaborate in the production of unmanned aerial vehicles. The corresponding agreement was signed by the Ukrainian side with the Norwegian Minister of Defense. Denis Shmyhal emphasized that this cooperation will become an important stage in expanding Ukraine's production capabilities and strengthening the country's defense capacity. The top priority is to quickly launch an experimental production line as early as 2026.
We are gaining access not only to production facilities, but also accordingly to NATO countries' technologies. And this also means the possibility of cooperation in the production of Ukrainian drones and accordingly the exchange of experience both in the practical use of Ukrainian interceptor and strike drones, as well as in scaling up their production.
A similar model of cooperation is also being implemented with the United Kingdom. A few days ago, Kiev signed a licensing agreement for large-scale production of Octopus interceptor drones at British facilities.
This is an exclusively Ukrainian development, and it already has real-world application in combat conditions. This advanced drone can operate at night and is proficient in countering sophisticated electronic warfare systems with its advanced capabilities. And what's notable is that this drone can operate at low altitudes.
The manufactured interceptor drones will be delivered to Ukraine to strengthen its defense against Russian drones. The Octopus project is being implemented as a joint defense industrial initiative. The United Kingdom has obtained a license for mass production of the Ukrainian interceptor, and Ukraine will receive them to enhance its own interception capabilities.
The signed agreement provides for the production of several thousand interceptor drones for the needs of Ukraine's defense forces, specifically at enterprises in the United Kingdom, which essentially eliminates the possibility for the Russian side to destroy the defense facilities manufacturing this product.
3 manufacturers have already received the necessary technologies to produce the Octopus drones. Another 11 companies are preparing production lines for them. After the start of Russia's full-scale aggression in 2022, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's main partners. London is providing substantial military assistance. In addition, the United Kingdom is actively promoting sanctions pressure on Russia and providing financial support to Kyiv.
The United Kingdom is a pioneer when it comes to the practical implementation of so-called coalitions. The Drone Coalition, the Naval Coalition, the Strike Capabilities Coalition, and accordingly, it was the United Kingdom that was the first to provide Ukraine with heavy weaponry. In particular, this refers to the Challenger 2 tank. Only after the corresponding actions by the United Kingdom did the United States provide Ukraine with its Abrams tanks.
There are also plans in Ukraine to create robotic strongpoints, which will be equipped with combat modules to counter Russian occupiers.
First and foremost, this concerns the logistics component. That is, ground robots will take on the main part of logistics, reducing to zero the losses of personnel and accordingly equipment of Ukraine's defense forces. This refers to the delivery of ammunition and accordingly the evacuation of the wounded. In addition, these are engineering functions, such as mining and demining areas.
Earlier, Ukraine, together with the United States, began producing interceptor drones capable of countering Russian strike UAVs. Additionally, the Dutch government will provide 250 million euros for the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine under the PUR program. In the United States, in particular, anti-aircraft missiles for F-16s and munitions which Kiev needs most will be purchased.
That's all for today. But very soon, Front News will bring you new unique reports from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, gathered so that you know the truth. This was Volodymyr Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones.